December 7th, 1941, a date that would live in infamy. The Japanese Empire had struck Pearl Harbor with devastating precision. Battleships burned, thousands lay dead, and the Pacific Fleet lay shattered beneath black smoke and oil-slicked water. But beneath the wreckage, a new kind of battle had already begun. One fought with intelligence, courage, and the quiet hum of code machines. This is the story of how America turned the tide at a lonely atoll called Midway, the codebreakers' vigil. Deep in the basement of the 14th Naval District, Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort sat among towers of intercepted Japanese messages. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and exhaustion. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but his mind razor-sharp. For weeks, his cryptanalysts had been tracking fragments of a Japanese plan called Operation MI and a mysterious location codenamed AF. Rochefort felt it in his bones. Something enormous was coming. The moment of discovery. "Sir, another intercept from the Fourth Fleet," a young officer said, handing over a decoded message. It mentioned supplies for Operation MI and again AF. Rochefort's heart quickened. They didn't yet know where AF was, but they would soon. Then came the breakthrough, a clever ruse. Midway sent a plain message claiming its water plant had failed. Hours later, Japanese intercepts reported, "AF is short on water." They had them. AF was Midway. Admiral Nimitz's decision at Pearl Harbor. Admiral Chester Nimitz read Rochefort's report in silence. He understood immediately. The Japanese were coming for Midway, and he would be ready. The man who had inherited a shattered navy now saw an opportunity to strike back. "Gentlemen," he told his staff, "we're going to set a trap." The race to repair Yorktown. In dry docks across Pearl Harbor, 1,400 men swarmed over the carrier USS Yorktown. The ship had been nearly crippled at Coral Sea, but Nimitz gave the impossible order. "You have 3 days." Welders worked by torchlight, sparks flying into the night. Mechanics collapsed from exhaustion and kept going. Against all odds, Yorktown sailed on time, patched, bruised, but ready for war, preparing for battle. By early June, 3 American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, sailed to intercept the Japanese fleet. Their mission was simple yet suicidal: stop 4 enemy carriers before they reached Midway. The men knew the odds, but as the task force slipped quietly out to sea, there was a sense of grim resolve. This time, America would be ready. The calm before the storm. On Midway Atoll, Marine Colonel Harold Shannon walked the runway, inspecting his ragtag mix of outdated aircraft. "We'll stop them or die trying," he told his pilots. The men nodded silently, knowing many wouldn't return. Across the Pacific, Admiral Yamamoto's vast armada advanced toward them, confident that victory was inevitable. The first attack. At dawn on June 4, 1942, radar operators on Midway detected incoming aircraft. "Many planes, distance 90 miles, came the report. Sirens wailed. Pilots ran to their planes. Marine fighters took off into the rising sun and straight into a storm of Japanese Zeros. The sky turned into a fiery tornado of tracer rounds and smoke trails. Outnumbered and outgunned, the defenders fought with reckless bravery. Nagumo's fatal decision. After bombing Midway, Japanese commander Chuichi Nagumo faced a dilemma: launch a second strike or rearm his planes for ship attack. He chose wrong. As his crews swapped torpedoes for bombs, the decks filled with fuel lines, ammunition, and armed aircraft, a floating powder keg. At that same moment, American bombers were already in the air, heading straight for him. The torpedo squadron's sacrifice. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron of Torpedo Squadron 8 led his men in slow, outdated bombers straight into the Japanese fleet. One by one, they were cut down by Zero fighters. The sky filled with flames and wreckage. Of 15 planes, none survived. Only one man, Ensign George Gay, lived, floating alone in the sea, watching his squadron die around him. Their torpedoes failed, but their courage pulled Japan's defenses out of position. The dive bombers arrive. At 10:22 a.m., Commander Wade McCluskey's dive bombers found the Japanese carriers through breaks in the clouds. He gave the order, "Attack immediately!" The American planes dived from the sun, screaming toward the enemy. Within minutes, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were burning, their decks exploding in fireballs that consumed hundreds of aircraft. The ocean turned orange and black with oil and flame. Hiryu's counterattack. The lone surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, struck back fiercely. Her pilots hit Yorktown with precision bombs and torpedoes, setting her ablaze. But the Americans refused to yield. Damage control crews fought fire and flooding for hours. When Hiryu was finally located, American dive bombers returned the favor, leaving her burning from bow to stern. The battle ends. By nightfall, all 4 Japanese carriers, the same ships that had struck Pearl Harbor, were gone. The once invincible Kido Butai had been annihilated. The sea was littered with debris, lifeboats, and the faint glow of oil fires. For Japan, it was the beginning of the end. The aftermath. The numbers told the story. Japan lost 4 carriers, 1 cruiser, and over 3,000 men. The US lost 1 carrier and 362 lives, but the strategic impact was enormous. The Japanese Navy would never again go on the offensive. The tide of the Pacific War had turned. Legacy and reflection. Midway became a symbol of intelligence, courage, and sacrifice. It proved that information could be as powerful as firepower, that a handful of brave men could change the course of history. As Admiral Nimitz later wrote, they had no right to win, yet they did, because they refused to accept defeat. The price of victory, the celebration at Pearl Harbor, was bittersweet. Hundreds of families waited for letters that would never arrive. Pilots who had joked over coffee a week before were now names on casualty lists. Yet in the stillness after the storm, America realized it could win. The ghosts of Pearl Harbor had finally been avenged. Yamamoto's shock. Aboard his flagship far to the west, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto received the news in silence. His pride, the Kido Butai, was gone. He had warned Tokyo that war with America could not be sustained, that after 6 months the tide would turn. It had been exactly 6 months since Pearl Harbor. The intelligence triumph. In Honolulu's basement code room, Rochefort's team listened to radio silence. The Japanese fleet was gone. They had done it. But there were no medals, no headlines, only quiet satisfaction and the hum of typewriters continuing their work. History would forget their faces for decades. Admiral Nimitz's message. Admiral Nimitz composed his report with understated precision. The enemy has been repulsed. Beneath the words lay the weight of history. He credited the codemen, the pilots, the mechanics, and the sailors, ordinary Americans who had refused to give up when everything seemed lost. The shift in power. The Battle of Midway changed everything. Japan's dream of Pacific dominance ended on that day. For the first time since the war began, America held the initiative. Factories in California roared to life. New carriers rolled off the slips, each named in honor of those lost. The human courage. The real story of Midway wasn't strategy, it was people. Pilots flying through flak until their fuel ran dry. Sailors standing at burning guns. Radio men calling for help as flames closed in. Their courage turned intelligence into victory. George Gay's witness, floating alone in the Pacific, Ensign George Gay watched the sea burn. He saw the Japanese carriers explode one by one. The bodies of his friends drifted beside him. Hours later, American rescuers pulled him from the waves. The only survivor of his squadron, the living witness to victory bought with sacrifice. A new era of War Midway marked the end of the battleship age and the rise of the carrier. Never again would great fleets fight within sight of each other. From now on, victory belonged to the air, to to the pilots who struck unseen across the horizon. The Japanese perspective. For Japan, the loss was more than ships. It was pride. Their elite pilots, trained over years, were gone. Replacement crews would never match their skill. Even as Tokyo proclaimed victory, the truth was whispered only among admirals. The Empire's advance had ended. Guadalcanal and beyond Midway was only the beginning. Soon came Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Leyte. Each battle would push Japan further back. But every American who fought remembered Midway, proof that courage and strategy could rewrite destiny. Rochefort's recognition. Despite his brilliance, Joseph Rochefort was quietly reassigned after Midway. Bureaucrats in Washington resented his independence. It would take 40 years for the Navy to honor him properly. In 1986, he was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Medal. Admiral Spruance's judgment. Admiral Raymond Spruance resisted the temptation to chase the retreating Japanese. He knew Yamamoto's battleships waited in the dark. His decision preserved the victory. In restraint, he showed genius. The moral of Midway. Midway taught the world that intelligence, preparation, and courage could overcome impossible odds. It proved that free nations could stand against tyranny and win. The message would echo through generations of sailors who swore never to forget. The legacy of Midway. Today, Midway Atoll is quiet, a wildlife refuge, its runways cracked and overgrown. But beneath its calm blue waters lie the wrecks of the ships that changed history. Divers descend through sunbeams to touch the metal that once carried heroes. Closing narration. The Battle of Midway was more than a military victory. It was a triumph of intelligence over ignorance, preparation over complacency, and courage over fear. It proved that even in the darkest hour, hope can rise from the sea. The men of Midway showed the world that freedom is never given. It is earned, defended, and remembered.